Hi there, this is Dane Evans with A Queer Death, and I am going to be walking through my zine called Facing Death is Revolutionary. I wanted to write this zine because my sister in law was having a hard time kind of processing going to protests. And I understood that fear because, before I had gone to my first protest, it was really anxiety producing. You think about, people lighting fires in the streets and, you know, big hordes of cops coming and arresting everybody. Um, and so I wanted to write this zine discussing why we have those fears and not to get rid of those fears, but to decide within our own bodies when that fear is appropriate and when that fear is more of a discomfort and should be worked through and utilized actually. So this is um, Facing Death is Revolutionary by A Queer Death, aka me. Hi. So as we start every single one of these, there's a care warning. This one says, we're going to get in our feelings. This zine might bring up some anxiety or depression around grief. I should have also expressed that it could bring up anxiety and depression around the fear of death. Um, it is meant as a tool for connection, for commiseration, compassion, and care. So it's really, this is basically just saying this is a tool to be used to reflect on your own fears. Please be sure to check your mental toolbox, aka box breathing, which is in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, out for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts. And body scans, which we talk about in another zine, which I'll be walking through next. Body scans are basically you start from either your toes or your head and you go up the body, giving your energy and your thanks to those different parts of your body. And journaling, of course. So now we're going to get into it. So under this first heading, it says the heading is Fearing Death in the Fight for Liberation, which is what we're talking about. Now I'm not saying that you have to die for your cause, which I wanted to make that clear at the first line. Instead, I'm suggesting that fear of death and dying can stop us from taking action. So in the my sister-in-law didn't let that stop her. She went to that protest, and now she's been to a few protests. So this is talking about how that fear can stop us from doing things. Not that it's wrong to have that fear. I know this to be true personally, through personal experience. I was very nervous going to my first queer liberation march, but I joined and it was an amazing experience. And I joined them many, many times, as well as other protests. So yeah, the Queer Liberation March in New York was my first introduction to, well, actually that's not true. I was at the protests in Chicago for Occupy Chicago during the Occupy Wall Street movement, but that was more, I was filming that event and those protests, so I didn't feel like an active part in them. I was really just recording them. But the Queer Liberation March is when I started actually deciding that I was going to be a body in a crowd that was fighting for this. And it was intimidating, of course, at first. And then it turned out, to be really, really rewarding. And I was proud to be part of that movement. It can be scary to stand up for what is right. That's the truth. Because our bodies equate confrontation with removal from society and removal from society with death. So basically, if you are seen as, someone who speaks up if you are seen as someone who, who advocates for other people, a lot of times there's a fear that we will not be accepted into our normal spaces anymore. Think about family members who are like, why did you have to go to that? Why did you have to say that? Why did, And our bodies naturally feel that if we're not in those spaces, if we don't have those spaces anymore, that removal from society, that we will die. Because in the past, it was true. If we were kicked out of society for whatever reason, we wouldn't have access to food or people that care for us and care for our families. It's less true now because we, through individualism and things like that, we are able to take care of, many people are able to take care of themselves without their, some of those sometimes very toxic spaces. And sometimes people are even better off without those toxic spaces. But yes, that is the kind of like origin of that fear of confrontation. We also feel this fear with the possibility of physical violence. It is completely natural to be afraid of these things. When we're talking about physical violence at a protest, and we talk about that later, but it's not uncommon. It's not unheard of, but it's not common to have that kind of physical violence at a protest. And every single protest that I've gone to where there was violence, the violence was enacted by the police. It was never, ever the protesters causing violence, physical violence to other people. It was the police. So just wanted to mention that. It's completely natural to be afraid of these things. We are not trying to remove fear. We are learning how and when to move into action with our fear in tow. So this was something that my spouse brought up to me. She was like, are you trying to get people to not be afraid? And I was like, no, I think that people, going to protests and things like that, it sometimes is a scary thing. Speaking up for other people is sometimes a scary thing. So it's not about removing that fear. It's natural to have a fear around that. It's just asking the question of whether or not that fear in our bodies is something that is not legitimate. Every feeling is legitimate. But is that fear stopping us from doing what's right? Or is that fear legit, like actually trying to tell you like, no, you're going to be in danger. Please don't go. It's a hard thing to kind of suss out sometimes. So the next heading is, what does fear look like in revolution? Some folks have anxiety around protests, like my sister-in-law. Marches and rallies can be intimidating, as it was when for the first one I went to, and large groups daunting. Now, that's still true for a lot of people, and me included. It's just the idea of so many people can be an intimidating thought. But most protests are peaceful, and there are guides explaining ways to protect yourself and others, especially against the police. One of these guides is from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which I love, and they talk about how to protect yourself digitally, so with your phones and things like that, how to protect your identity and your safety when it comes to the internet and phones and things like that. Some folks are afraid to visibly show support for a cause, especially something as polarizing as the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. This fear can be founded on the potential violence someone might face if, say, they wear a keffiyeh in public and receive reactions of anger and hate. And so I drew the best interpretation I could of a keffiyeh. I am not an artist. And if you know what a keffiyeh looks like, there is a lot of detail in it. And I did not have the patience to draw all of that detail. So it's a little you know, sparse, but it's still, that's what it represents as a kafia. And So what I was trying to say here is that sometimes visible representations of our beliefs, of our values, can piss people off. You think about, you know, wearing, we talk about it later, wearing a trans flag pin, and how you might get people staring and you might get people talking and, you know, things like that. And it can be scary. It can be scary because you don't know what is going to escalate. And what we talk about later is that the fear of escalation is not always a reason to not visibly show your support for things. Um, it's all about really diving into whether or not your fears are, um, you know, what your fears are based in. If you're afraid to wear a trans flag or a keffiyeh to work because you're going to get fired, um, then there are, of course, you know, rules and protections that should protect you in your free speech. But you have to decide, okay, well, is it worth getting fired? You can't say one thing for everybody because there are people who have to take care of their family. There are people who have to take care of their, you know, community, and can't afford to get fired. That's a rock and a hard place. That's really tough. There are other people who are, you know, able to take that hit. So this is basically, you know, so this is saying a lot of things. This is saying a lot of things. But you get it. Some are afraid of state violence, especially the use of lethal force. This could be with police, deportation, being fired because of your beliefs, and other such fears. I drew a picture of a police officer in riot gear because that, again, like I said earlier, is the only time I've seen violence at a protest is through the police. And it's again, it's like, you know, getting fired. Can you take that, you know, that heat? Can you take the heat of being arrested? If I were arrested, then there would not be very many ramifications for that. Whereas, you know, if one of my friends was arrested, they might be deported, or you know, a long list of um, of acts of violence towards them. Um, and of course, this is, like I said before, you know, these are extreme examples. I've been to protests and have never been arrested. So, you know, these are extreme examples, but they do happen. I've known people who have been arrested at protests. So yeah, so this is kind of wrapping up what we were saying about being fired, you know, deportations, which are happening left and right now, and are you in a, you know, are you in a safe place in your life where you can risk that or no? Physical violence in these situations is uncommon, like I said, but it does happen, especially to people of color and trans people, especially now with the number of ICE raids happening, so, you know, increasing so greatly. This can happen, you know, especially to Black and brown people, and to trans people. Trans rights keep being denied, and it can be really hard to be a trans person at a protest. Usually, though, it looks like a comment under the breath, or a verbal confrontation, or a look or a stare. These are the things that we have to explore within ourselves. Is it okay to handle that? Can I handle it if somebody looks at me and says, blah, 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 tries to be confrontational or gives me a stare or something? Is that something that I can handle? My answer personally, then everybody has to answer this question themselves, but my answer personally is yes, I can handle that because I am a white cis person. I might be queer, but I have a lot of privilege, and so a look or a stare or a comment, it doesn't have um, it doesn't have the same level of potential violence as it does for other people. But again, everybody has to answer that question for themselves. Is it something that you feel safe confronting? So, what can we do about this fear? Well, we can start slow if you're just beginning your activist journey. Join a small local rally or protest and go with friends and family. This is what we did with my sister-in-law. We started at a small local rally, and there were a lot of people there, and everybody was just kind of chilling and nice, and the police weren't even there, I don't think. So it was a really good experience for her and for other members of my family that have never been to a protest. You can even speak at a town hall about an injustice in your community. This again is more along the lines of you might get looks and comments, but not physical, but most likely not physical violence. And is that okay? Is it okay to get those looks and those stares? If you're standing up for something that's right and that's in your values and that you believe in. One of the best things that we can do is listen to our bodies and question the feelings that come up. This is what I've been talking about the whole time. What could some of the reasons for your fear be? Try to answer this question honestly and decide if that fear should be acted on or if it should be worked through. Again, like we've been talking about, is it okay to get looks and comments? Or if you're going into a situation where you're going to get punched in the face, you have to make that decision. Learning how to process and de-escalate situations so they do not become physical is important. And learning how to protect yourself if it does become physical is equally important. De-escalation training is so important. It will keep you safe and the people around you safe. And then also self-defense is so important because there are people out there that want to mess around and use their fists and their other things, So how do you protect yourself? These are always good questions to ask. Now, here's the part about, how each individual person has to decide within themselves and their identities what is safe. Be clear with yourself about what is discomfort and what is danger. For many cis, male, straight, white people, discomfort does not usually signal danger. So that's that look, that's that glance, even especially with the police, a look or a glance or a, hey, can you open your bag, kind of thing, does not usually end in violence. Whereas for people of color and trans people, the numbers are higher on that. For example, a person fitting the description of a cis male, straight, white person would be safer in public space wearing a trans flag pin, like we were mentioning earlier. And they would be safer with that trans flag pin than a black trans woman who was doing the same. So that is always a moment to be like, ooh, is it okay for me to wear this? Because will I be safe doing that? Or would it make me uncomfortable? And working through discomfort is the goal of this, When you call out problems in a system, especially one under the threat of fascism, dirty looks, comments under the breath, and unkind words will be common. And look, I even drew a little picture of a lady shouting. You are the only one that can decide where on the spectrum between discomfort and danger you are willing to act. Right? So that's what we've been discussing this whole time, is this spectrum of danger, actual, the potential of actual physical danger versus discomfort. And where on the spectrum you are comfortable participating in, speaking up and showing your values. The possibility of dying is always with us. That's the thing that we just always should remember, because it is. And sometimes, that's why we have the care warning. That's why I have the care warning at the beginning, is because that is sometimes a really impactful, painful thing to remember, that death is always with us. And others will capitalize on that fear, the fear of the possibility of violence and death, to keep you still and silent. It is purposeful that we feel afraid to speak up. It is purposeful that we feel afraid not to wear a keffiyeh or not to show a trans flag. It's purposeful. It's meant to keep you silent. Working towards unshackling yourself from that can help you use your voice in the fight for liberation. And remembering that all of our liberations are connected, that one person is not liberated without the other, is crucial. That is so important to remember. So I hope that this zine will help you to kind of reflect on that spectrum of dangerous action and uncomfortable action, and where you fit into that, because we all need to be working towards the liberation of everybody. That is the goal. I know it's called a queer death, and we didn't talk a lot about death, but it is pervasive in everything. And it is that fear of death. It is that fear of violence that stops a lot of us from speaking up. And let's talk about it. Let's get into it, So I'm very thankful for you listening or watching this. It means a lot to me. I sell these online now. So these little zines I sell online at aqueerdeath.com. And it's really just to help support me. It's fun for me. I put a lot of work into these little zines, and I love making them, and will never stop doing that. It's just a helpful little thing, like, hey, here's some money for paper. I don't know. And you would get one, in the mail. So feel free to log on to queerdeath.com and check them out. And I appreciate you very much. And I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye.